I mean, this will be the fourth Great American Bash under the under the NXT umbrella specifically. So this will be the fourth Great American Bash under the NXT umbrella, the second in front of people, and the first one outside of Florida. Obviously, the first one was 2020. They pulled out this card when, obviously, the pandemic, they were trying to do what they could. They pulled out the In Your House thing. They pulled out Halloween Havoc, and they pulled out Great American Bash. 2021 still also in front of nobody except for some superstars of the NXT background. And then last year, they did it back in front of the Full Sail crowd. But this weekend, it's going to be out of Florida. It's going to be in the Austin, Texas area of Cedar Park, Texas, home of the AHL's Texas Stars. I don't know why they picked this venue. It currently looks like they're going to get about 4,000. That's about what they are trying to get for NXT Great American Bash. And I can tell you what, based on experience alone, I don't know why they're not buttoning this up against SummerSlam. I don't know why this isn't in Detroit like next weekend, next Saturday afternoon, next Friday night, next Sunday night in Detroit, even the day after SummerSlam. I don't know why. I imagine they would get more than 4,000 just on default. I mean, we looked last year, Ric Flair's last match that was in Nashville. It wasn't a coincidence that it was in Nashville when SummerSlam was in Nashville. So I don't know why they do this. And they have another pay-per-view coming up September 30th. They just announced today, No Mercy, which will be in, I believe, Bakersfield, California. Again, not up against the WWE event. So I don't know what they're thinking. They're doing their own little thing there. I guess good for them. But this weekend on Peacock, Great American Bash. And here's a quick question, and I don't know the answer to it. But we all know about things being exclusive to Peacock, in which they're not. But I wonder if things like this are exclusive to Peacock. What I mean by that is if you are in another country, is this on WWE Network? From what I'm reading, it is also on WWE Network. But I know there are a few of those things, like, for example, the upcoming Cody Rhodes special that I think debuts this Monday. I think that's a Peacock exclusive. I don't think that is on WWE Network elsewhere in the world. But I am reading this is going to air on the WWE Network if you are outside of the United States. So that answers that question. So I posed a question and I answered it myself within 2 seconds. Guess we'll have to edit that one out in post. But are you kind of curious, very curious, what's your take on Great American Bash heading into this Sunday night? That's another thing, a Sunday night pay-per-view as well. What's your intrigue level for this?
I mean, initially I wasn't that intrigued by it, but obviously I've seen the card. I've seen some of the matches. Obviously I want to see Gable Steveson. I want to see that match with Baron Corbin. I think that's a match that I'm definitely interested in. And then obviously Dirty Dom versus Wesley and Mustafa Ali. That's going to be good. I think we know who's going to win that match. I think Dirty Dom's going to take care of business. And then, I do also want to see, obviously, Carmelo Hayes and Ilya Dragunov. There's I would say out of the 7 matches that are posted, I'd say 4 or 5 of those matches I feel like I'm going to be interested in watching. Some of them I don't really have a stake in. But overall, I'd say if I had to put on a scale of 1 to 10, I'd say I'm probably at a 6, just because half the matches I want to see and half the matches I could do without. So it's I'll watch them because, I'm going to watch the entire show, but I'm looking forward to a few of those matches. And the match I'm really looking forward to is I want to see how Gable Steveson is. I want to see what he brings to the table. Obviously, we know his background. We know the whole history behind him in the Olympics and at the University of Minnesota and all that. So I think that match in particular I'm really interested in because he's working with a proven veteran like Baron Corbin. So I think they're going to work very well together. And then, of course, the main event of the night is going to be Carmelo Hayes versus Ilya Dragunov for the NXT Championship. So I'm looking forward to that. Some of the other matches, they look on paper, they look halfway decent, but I'm focused in on I think 3 of those matches in particular, and I think I'll be watching. Depending on how the night goes, I'll probably watch it all that same night. Where do you stand on this?
So I do want to make a quick correction. When I did say it's the 11th Great American Bash, It is the 11th under WWE. So that is a quick correction. There was 14 under WCW. So 25th Great American Bash overall. I mean, I thought when I was reading it, it was like, I mean,
it sounded weird.
It was 11. Wow. You're like, I remember a lot of Great American Bashes under WCW. But again, I mean, there was 14 under WCW before WWE took over. And now this is the 11th and the 4th. So essentially there was 7 WWE ones, 4 NXT ones. But the match I'm looking forward to the most has got to be the one that's got 2 very well, I mean, I don't know about very well, but proven main roster guys. And then you got Wes Lee. You got Dom with Rhea Ripley versus Wes Lee and Mustafa Ali for the North American Championship. We saw the North American Championship actually defended this past week on Monday Night Raw in Atlanta. So they're really elevating this, and good job on WWE to do this kind of cross promotion. We've heard from Nick Khan before that they want NXT to be a third brand. Maybe that's why they're not buttoning it up against other pay-per-views. But that is a help to make this a third brand. I think easily it would have been a third brand if they never toyed with it years ago. But those are kinds of the things that are helping it get back to some dominance and some prominence in people's eyes. Unfortunately, it's taking main roster stars to do it when back in the day it was just NXT originals. But, you know, Dominic Mysterio, Wes Lee, Mustafa Ali, I'm looking forward to that. Obviously, the same with you. Gable Steveson, I mean, that's a big deal here, and it's kind of being underlooked because of this whole pay-per-view being NXT in general being underlooked. He's making his debut, and I guess good for them to kind of keep him on the NXT route, but I guess it's still weird that he's just going right at it. Like, it's fine that he's going the NXT route. That's the route you're kind of supposed to go. But it's not like he's been in NXT for a little. This isn't one of those Bray Wyatt things where we've been kind of waiting for him to make his NXT debut. He just like made his NXT debut, got himself in this storyline real quick. We're like wondering if it was a one-off, like if he was even hurt, like if he's deciding to leave WWE. Before that, we were wondering if he was like changing his mind about joining WWE. So it all kind of happened real fast. If you blinked and you haven't been watching WWE, especially NXT for the last month, you would have missed it. But that's the one I'm looking forward to the most. I think obviously, it's like the major league debut of somebody. It's like the minor league debut of somebody. It's probably more like the minor league debut of somebody because we know what they're capable of and we know where they expect them to be. Obviously, the main roster. We've already seen them at WrestleMania in Dallas, which seems like ages ago now. But here they are. In developmental, making their debut against a main talent guy in Baron Corbin. So I'm curious to see, what it looks like for 10 or 15 minutes.
Yeah, I think it's going to go. Yeah, it'll definitely go 10, 15 minutes. I feel like there's going to be enough there, enough storytelling, some great matches, great sequences. I'm looking forward to that. But you know what? I'm sitting here looking at the card, and there's one name in particular that I'm surprised is not on here, is Bron Breakker. But I did see though that he attacked Von Wagner this past week in NXT, so I'm wondering if there's possibly setting something up there that hasn't been announced yet. But I just feel like it's weird that you have an NXT pay-per-view without Bron Breakker. I get he's not the champion, but he's still a commodity. So I'm curious to see what happens there. But I will say to your point about WWE main roster, so Raw or SmackDown competitors that have come down, I like it. And the other aspect of it is because I like the fact that if you're not really doing much on the main roster, but you're still a main roster, guy or gal, when you go to NXT, you're already the biggest star on the roster because you've already made it to the main roster. You've already done stuff on the roster. So when you have competitors like Bron or like like Dominic Mysterio, you have Baron Corbin, guys like that, and AJ Styles has done it. Dolph Ziggler's done it. So when you get these competitors that are main roster individuals to come down and hang with the third tier, the third, the AAA affiliate of the WWE, it not only is it give those young competitors that are up and coming some rub against main roster competition, but for a lot of people, if you know that individual like Dominic Mysterio is going to be an NXT or an NXT pay-per-view, the ratings are going to go up. It's an obvious thing, and hate it or love it, Dominic Mysterio he's accomplished a lot in the last week. I don't know if you heard it on Corey Graves said it on Raw this past week that Dom is the first superstar to main event Raw, SmackDown, and NXT in the same week. That's a pretty cool feat. I didn't know that until he said that. And I'm like, well, you know what? He's pretty well. I think management loves them some Dom Mysterio, and I think eventually I'm curious to see if he can not be a heel, but I'm hoping he can go over as a face. I mean, right now, let's enjoy this. Let's let him be nuclear heat and everything. Let's let him do all that. But I'm curious to see what happens with him someday. But I think he still retains this weekend. I mean, I think, is that obvious, or is he retaining?
I mean,
I think
I don't know if it's obvious because it's an NXT belt, right? So I don't know if it's just to sell tickets for this, sell pay-per-view buys, if you will, get eyeballs on NXT.
But I think it'd be a bad look if they took it if a Judgment Day member dropped any belt at this point.
Well, again, remember this is a triple threat match, though, so he doesn't have to be pinned to lose the belt. And I think Dom is obviously one in which they could shake it off. He's not one that's going to be featured very prominently at SummerSlam or something like that. So this isn't going to screw up any SummerSlam plans if he loses. But I will say, Rey Mysterio actually has made the call that he says he wants to take the NXT North American belt off of Dom. And what do you think about that? What do you think of an NXT championship being defended, let's say, at Payback next month? Or even down the line at No Mercy NXT between two non-NXT competitors?
I like it. I mean, I think it's cool because, I guess some people are going to be hating on it because there's not a traditional NXT member of the roster, in that match. But for me, especially with the Rey Mysterio factor, Rey Mysterio has been a legend in this business for 30 years plus. So when you even have that belt, even in the same conversation, in the same breath as a Rey Mysterio, that only brings more eyeballs to NXT because people are going to relate it to, like, okay, Rey Mysterio is the greatest luchador of all time. I think we all can agree on that. So if a lot of the fans that follow Rey and have followed Rey for all these years, like you and I, you're going to be like, okay, he thinks it's important enough to wrestle an NXT match, like an NXT title match. So maybe people will be like, Rey Mysterio is doing some NXT stuff. Why don't I give that a try? And that's how you start to reel people in, and that's what they want to do. They're trying to build
right now.
that's
what we're doing with Dom right now. That's what we're doing with Mustafa Ali, Gabe Stevenson, Baron Corbin. The list goes on of the people they're bringing in to kind of draw eyeballs. Roxana Perez, Blair Davenport. I mean, I know Blair Davenport. She's the European. Roxana Perez, obviously the former NXT Women's Champion. Weapons Wild match. I mean, I don't know what to expect necessarily, but it's going to be interesting nonetheless. And how about this two matches on this card are women's matches? Obviously, they only have one women's belt, and they don't have the NXT Tag Team women's belts anymore. So obviously, the women's match that doesn't have a belt on the line, has got to step it up. But even the one that's got the belt on the line with Tiffany Stratton against Thea Hall from Chase University, which, to be honest with you, Chase University, I don't necessarily know if that was the plan, but it gets a lot more play than the group that obviously has Joe Gacy and The Rock's daughter in it. Because, again, here we are featured on a pay-per-view, and that group over there, with Joe Gacy and his disciples, if you will, they're nowhere to be found here. I think they're dropping the ball on NXT with those guys, especially, obviously, Dwayne The Rock Johnson's daughter, who is in that clan there. I think they're not utilizing them to the extent
here's the thing.
they should be.
You know how I feel about Joe Gacy. I'm not a huge Joe Gacy fan, so it really doesn't surprise me that they are where they are. I agree with you with The Rock's daughter. I like to see a little bit more from her. Maybe she could be paired up, or maybe she just has a dominating singles run. Just without being a part of Joe Gacy. To me, the reason why Chase University is just they're getting more of a run, they're getting more prominent television time, is because they're over with the fans. If you watch NXT, even if you're not watching it on a weekly basis, if you go in and watch it, you'll see a lot of Chase U shirts. And anytime anybody from Chase U comes out, you hear like Chase U. You hear they're very. I feel like they're very over in that brand. I feel like Duke Hudson and Andre Chase, they both are getting good pops when they come out. And then Thea Hall, she's young, but she's got a lot of talent. I think this time, she finally gets the win because, obviously the last match they had together, it didn't go her way, but it was one of those situations where it wasn't a clean finish. So I think Thea Hall, I think she's got a really good shot of tapping out Tiffany Stratton and taking that NXT Women's Championship.
Do you think Dragunov has a shot against Carmelo Hayes to dethrone him? Carmelo Hayes, as you remember, defeated Bron Breakker at the one WrestleMania weekend Stand and Deliver in Los Angeles and defeated him, became the champion. He's been the champion since. Dragunov, he's he's one of those guys who, like, you thought 2 years ago that he'd be where like a Gunther is right now, right? But here he is going for the NXT championship, trying to keep that brand entertaining in that regard. He is somebody I think that's probably too good for the current NXT, if you ask me. I think he would have been great for, the NXT Gold and Black back in the day in the takeovers, which he was part of, some of them. But I think he's kind of too good for this brand, but either way, I like watching him. He's got me intrigued. I'd rather see Carmelo Hayes versus him than pretty much with anybody else. Do you think Dragunov is going to take the belt off of Carmelo Hayes, or do you think Carmelo Hayes continues with the belt and stays on NXT? Obviously, because I think if he loses the belt, there might be a chance he gets the call-up.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of variables here, and either way, for the fans, I feel like it's a win-win no matter who wins the match, because I think really, savvy wrestling fans like ourselves, we like both Hayes and Dragunov. I think we both think they're both main roster caliber talents. I feel like that's what they're going to be in the very near future. So I mean, if I get my wish, then if Carmelo Hayes drops the belt, then he goes to the main roster. That would be cool. But I still think I think Carmelo is going to hold on to that belt for a little bit longer. I don't see him dropping the belt. I think it's going to be a highly contested match, but I think Carmelo keeps that belt for a little bit longer.
CBS Sports gave Dragunov's match against Gunther/Walter match of the year in 2020, and I don't even know. I'm looking at it right now. I don't know if they're just calling NXT, but frankly, looking back on 2020, I'm going to say it's match of the year. Personally, regardless of if it's just NXT UK, just NXT, just non-WWE, because WWE wasn't putting out anything of that quality better than that in 2020. No. So, I mean, in 2020, right, during the midst of the pandemic, he had match of the year against Gunther, and here he is, still on the NXT brand, still, in Austin, Texas, Cedar Rapids, Texas, not, where Gunther, not an Imperium, those kind of places we expected him to be, I guess, at that time. But I'm looking forward to it. And frankly, I would like him to win the belt. I think, listen, Carmelo Hayes is great. He's entertaining. But unfortunately, what made NXT so great back in the day wasn't necessarily, the main roster entertaining kind of guys. It was the hard hitters. It was the Coles. It was the Ciampas. It was that group of guys that put on great wrestling matches. And I think NXT, listen, I understand that they're not necessarily going back to the black and gold, but a Dragunov as your champion, treat him like Walter, and I think NXT will definitely have good things with that going forward. And it brings up everybody else's game. If you have him as your champion, anybody who approaches him has got to up their game. Dragunov obviously upped his game when he had to take on Walter. So I think if you had him as champion, you're going to have the NXT champion up there with the realms of Austin Theory, Gunther, Roman Reigns, like all those guys on the main roster who are just killing it with the belts. Dragunov, I think, could be the Roman Reigns, if you will, of the NXT brand if he becomes champion.
I mean, it's definitely plausible. I mean, I guess we're gonna have to wait and see. I mean, I don't know. I have this feeling that I feel like Trick Williams is gonna do something. I feel like he's gonna help his boy out. That's another guy that people don't talk about is Trick Williams. I feel like Carmelo Hayes just isn't the same without Trick Williams. So like, I love them as a pairing, and I hope wherever Melo goes, Trick is not too far behind, because he's not only is he over, but to me, they're a unit, I feel like. So if that happens and Dragunov wins, I feel like he could carry NXT like a Walter or a Gunther, as we call him now, how he did things. So I think it's tough for me because I like both guys. I'm not going to be mad either way. It's one of those positions where it's like it's going to be such a quality match that you just don't want it to end. You're like, all right.
I hope so.
Well, yeah. I mean, obviously we don't want, I want it to be a good match, and it will be a good match, but I don't care at the end of the day who wins the match, really, because I like them both very much, and no matter what direction NXT goes, with one of those two guys as he's the lead dog, the leader of the pack, so to speak, then you could take that route where he could be, where Dragunov could be the big dog of NXT. So it's going to be interesting to see. I'm looking forward to seeing that match. Dirty Dom, I think that's going to be a lot of fun. Like, I mean, the card's not bad. I mean, I gave it a 6. I'm really curious to see how Gable Stevenson's going to do. That's, to me, that's the most intrigue, because like we know what we're getting with Carmelo Hayes and Dragunov. We're getting a hell of a match. We know what we're going to get with Dirty Dom. Dirty Dom's going to do what Dirty Dom does because Rhea Ripley's going to help him out. We know something like that's going to happen. But the big unknown is Gable Steveson ready for the big time? And I think he is. I think he really is. And he's paired up with a guy like Baron Corbin, who I said earlier is the right guy. He's a veteran, proven commodity in the business. It's not a bad person to be on the other side of the ring facing you in a big situation like this. And it's his debut, so it's going to be exciting.
NXT this Sunday night, Bron Breakker, like we mentioned, currently not on the card. He's on the poster for the event. Very well could be off the card because it seems like a pretty solid card nonetheless. And hey, I mean, maybe they're doing the same thing they're kind of doing over on the main roster, where they're keeping some people on TV to keep television interesting. So you want to see Bron Breakker, you got to tune in Tuesday nights, but also the pay-per-views have intrigue as well. So get your eyeballs essentially on both. But we'll see if a match for Bron Breakker is made for this Sunday.